Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're just going to give people a couple of minutes to join before we get started. Good afternoon and welcome to this week's Wednesday webinar. We'll just give people another minute or so to come into the room before we get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this week's National Hemophilia Foundation Wednesday webinar. My name is Fiona Robinson, and I am the host of this webinar series. In today's webinar, we will learn all about corporate giving. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have throughout the presentation by using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Today's speaker will answer some of your questions partway through her presentation, and then at the end, I will present any remaining questions to our speaker. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to the community beginning on Friday, July 14th. Today, I'm joined by Teecee Hutcherson, Senior Director of Corporate Relations at NHF. Teecee's presentation today is entitled Corporate Giving 101. Thank you so much for joining us today, Teecee. I'll turn things over to you now.
Thanks so much. Hey, everyone. I hope you all are doing well today. We appreciate you joining us today. You could be appreciate you spending a little bit of time with us. 101, if there are additional, we'll keep this pretty high level overview. If there are additional questions or if you want to go down a specific path, we can always add a part 2 or a corporate giving 202 class. But for today's agenda, we'll spend a little bit of time in 3 different sections. So one, starting off with kind of defining what corporate giving is and all that it entails. Then we will move into NHF's strategy for corporate giving, what our approach is, and we'll also talk a little bit about some of our current partners. Then we'll slide into, as a member of the patient community, how can you support? And then we'll end with a little bit of Q&A. Please feel free to ask questions throughout. I'll try to manage the chat screen and the question and answer screen while I'm reading. Hopefully I'll be able to kind of manage the 2 of those. So we'll start off quickly with a little bit of a definition of corporate giving. I'll say at its core, corporate giving and corporate philanthropy is really, the actions that a business takes to improve the well-being and welfare of others in partnership with nonprofit organizations. And this really varies company by company. You'll see some companies really create their strategies, their pillars, their initiatives around their product. So think of like a toy company, for example, Mattel. They'll probably focus on youth development or education, really kind of appealing to the customers and the product that they have. Others really try to focus beyond that. You can think of maybe focusing on local needs and whether it be human services or whatnot. But so the strategies and initiatives that organizations have, it just really kind of depends on their strategy. There are a lot of different ways that you can look at corporate giving. I think most people really just think of like the financial contributions, but you can also consider volunteering hours, also event sponsorship and in-kind donations. When you think about volunteering, if, for example, I were to, volunteer 2 hours reading at a local elementary school, over the course of the year, those 24 hours, organizations begin to like equate that to a financial amount and consider that corporate giving also. When you think of in-kind donations, if I am Dell or Microsoft or even Apple, and I donate new, refurbished, or even almost broken equipment, that has a dollar value attached to it also. And that amount is considered a part of corporate giving or corporate philanthropy also. Typically, when we're reaching out to corporations, there's two different areas that we reach out to. Oftentimes, there's a corporate social responsibility department, which typically lives under HR. Oftentimes, corporations have a foundation as well. So that's typically one bucket. The second bucket that we generally reach out to before event sponsorships are big in the nonprofit space. And so oftentimes that funding will come from the marketing department as opposed to the corporate social responsibility department. This slide here is something I like to show when I'm giving these types of presentations. I think on the left-hand side, we have the myth versus actuality, reality, what really happens in corporate giving. So I think a lot of people think that because corporations make so much money that they're constantly giving out really large checks. So on the left-hand side here, you see an organization giving out nearly $250,000 to a nonprofit. And this absolutely happens. But I think people think that this is like typically how corporations are dealing out funds. Whereas on the right-hand side, you'll see a pie graph, and this is from Giving USA. They share this information annually. And you're looking at a pie chart of all of philanthropy and the breakdown of it from individuals to foundations. And you'll see that the smallest piece of the pie is in the corporate giving space. Now, $21 billion, billion with the B, is a massive amount of money. But this also includes the financial contributions that we mentioned in the previous slide, also the volunteering. So, as an example, that 2-hour volunteering that I gave you, if I am an employee that makes, $50,000 and I volunteer 2 hours per month, and at 24 hours per year, a corporation will actually figure out, what that dollar amount is, and equate that to a financial number. And so this 6%, this 21 billion includes the financial contributions, the volunteering, the in-kind donations, as well as event sponsorship. So when you think of large events like the Boston Marathon, that's a nonprofit organization. So when you think of their presenting sponsors, that dollar amount is also included in there. When you think of hospitals or universities, and that how they may have a building or a program named after a company, that also falls into that 6% as well. So I included this slide just so we're able to kind of begin to visually picture, how corporate giving kind of aligns or how it measures up to the entire philanthropy pie, and then all the things that are included percentage. So this next slide right here really talks about kind of what inspires corporate giving strategies and how they kind of arrive at them. I think at the very beginning, when you think of like the days of like Rockefeller and Carnegie, leadership of corporations really kind of gave based on their pet projects or their personal interests. And then I think maybe around the 60s or so, when we began to see like social movements and environmental movements, organizations began to become a little bit more strategic and think about their social and ethical responsibilities when it comes to their business, and also begin to think about how they can leverage their giving strategies to build relationships internally with their employees, and then also externally within the community and also within their consumers. So like I mentioned, they're really looking for opportunities to create, mutually beneficial opportunities for, obviously their company, the nonprofit, and the surrounding community. Looking for value alignment also. And so obviously, we talked about earlier how it kind of varies organization by organization, but if they're focused on access, whether it be educational access or healthcare access, diversity, environment, and things of that nature, just trying to make sure that their pillars and their strategies align with the nonprofits that they intend to partner with. Also, as I mentioned, employee recruitment, engagement, and retention. I think a lot of companies are really focusing right now on millennials and Gen Z and their approach to career choices. and really trying to ensure that that their employees, that they're able to attract employees, but also keep them engaged, while they're during their tenure with their organization. And then similarly, just like they're looking to do that internally, organizations are looking to do that externally as well. When you begin to think of brand loyalty, value, and reputation. I think what's really interesting about corporate giving is that you see the entire spectrum of philanthropy. There are companies on one end of the spectrum that are really focused on altruism. And then you have the other end where they may leverage philanthropy to really right a wrong that they may have created. If you can think of like maybe oil spills and things of that nature, how corporations will kind of begin to give to like the environment and things like that after they've kind of made a little bit of a taboo or had some challenges, or even like fast fashion corporations that are really focused on sustainability and environment, if they've been called out for like pollution and things of that nature. So this next slide here, I included just because I think people often ask, what are the kind of the causes that receive the most funding? So on this top slide, on the top graph, this is basically focused on the top focused areas that companies reported. And then the bottom is on total giving area. So you'll see that, we fall into NHF falls into the health and human services section, which appears to be a fairly large section on both sides, which is awesome. I think that, I think you have to begin to think about all the things that kind of fall into that when you think of it from like an NHF perspective. Because we're like a specific disease state, we're also competing for those dollars against, hospitals, other large diseases, cancer, heart disease, and things of that nature, medical schools. So it can become very competitive. Also, it's a human services piece, so that includes like food pantries and managing unhoused populations and things of that nature. So something just to think about when we begin to kind of position yourself or position your nonprofit, position your programming against other nonprofits in the community and across your local community, across the state, or across the country. So I'll take a quick pause right here and see if there are any questions that anyone's asked so far. Looking like a no for now, so I'll continue to move on. In this next section, we'll begin to talk about NHF's strategy for corporate giving. So our corporate giving kind of falls into 4 different buckets, some of the ones that you've seen in some of the previous slides. So the first one up is event sponsorship. So for us, I think our largest approach here is our Unite Walk. So opportunities for corporations, whether in the local community or national organizations, to really be able to engage with the community, engage their employees at the walk. Also an opportunity to kind of create some of that brand loyalty when it comes to signage and things of that nature. Signage at the event, signage on local chapters websites, as well as a national chapter website. So that's one of our major ways of engaging with corporations. The second bucket is grants. So think of corporate grants like a Wells Fargo, SC Johnson, Cigna, JP Morgan Chase. So opportunities for corporations to kind of create another vehicle to partner with nonprofit organizations. Typically, this process includes an application. Maybe you have to submit budgeting for programming and things of that nature. For us to kind of begin to create partnerships there. The third bucket is under program support. For us at NHF, this could be maybe summer camps for some of our family camps or some of our youth camps. We also have our Unite Walk to kind of fall in this category also. And then the fourth bucket is that area that I'm really looking to focus on is retail point of sale campaigns. So we've all been at the store and someone's asked us if we would be interested in rounding up rounding up our receipt to the nearest dollar to donate that change to an organization, or if asked us if we'd be willing to like donate $1, donate $5, and people will begin to see a lot of that as we enter into like the back to school time, and people will be preparing back to school backpacks and things of that nature. We've been able to create a strong program with Marble Slab Creamery They're really strong in the East Coast and kind of somewhat in the Mid Coast, not so much in the Midwest. Not so much out West, excuse me. Where we've partnered with a handful of locations to create a point of sale campaign. We've been doing that for the past 4 years, and so that's an area where I'm really looking to expand NHF's footprint there. This next slide kind of just shares some of our current partners. Like I mentioned, Marble Slab Creamery, Fat Brands. We'll be partnering with the Comedy Store, which is a comedy event space out in Los Angeles in the fall. They'll be hosting an event, a benefit event for us. And then below, you'll see one of the Keenan Foundation, one of the partners that we have received grant funding from there. Corporate partnership for NHF is kind of somewhat of a new frontier. We've mostly been receiving most of our funding from pharmaceutical organizations or pharmaceutical companies. And so now my focus really here is I signed on about a year or so ago, really to kind of create partnerships with corporations kind of outside of that space. And as I mentioned, point of sale campaigns, creating events is kind of one of those focus areas for us. I'm moving to the third section in terms of how can I support. So if you're a part of the patient community or a loved one of the patient community, I think there are 2 things that you can really focus on to be able to kind of help in this space. I would say one is really begin to advocate for NHF and local hemophilia affiliates with your employer. Oftentimes there are employee resource groups that will select a nonprofit to support maybe for an event or maybe for end of year giving or things of that nature. I think that's the opportunity for you to kind of raise your hand and say, hey, what about National Hemophilia Foundation? It's been a passion of mine for, then, add your spiel in there, begin to kind of raise your hand and include us there. I think also you can kind of, speak with your corporate social responsibility department or maybe speak with your HR or personnel department and ask, are there opportunities for us to kind of join the Unite Walk? Are there opportunities for us to raise our hand and maybe suggest a nonprofit, for your employer, for them to kind of partner with in the future? Just kind of begin to kind of poke around and ask those questions to kind of see how you can kind of get the foot in the door in terms of raising awareness for NHF and our local affiliates. The second way in which you can kind of raise your hand and kind of get involved, I think, is with employee matching gift programs. So this is kind of a way for corporations to continue to add benefits for their employees. And so oftentimes corporations will match 1-to-1 your gift to an organization. So as an example, if I were to donate $50 to NHF, corporations, if it's a 1-to-1 match, a corporation would match that $50, and now NHF will be receiving $100. Matching gift programs vary organization by organization. Some do a 1-to-1 match. Some do a 2-to-1 match. We've seen it go all the way up to 4-to-1. That's a rarity, but it does happen. I've also seen it where employers would match a spouse's gift as well. So that's another way for you to kind of continue to support NHF and other nonprofit organizations. If you're not sure if your company matches charitable contributions, on our website, we have a link to a search where you can kind of enter in your information, your company's information, and it'll let you know if that corporation has an employee matching program. Or you can always just reach out to your personnel, your HR department to kind of figure out if that's something that you'd be interested in. But I think it's a way for us to continue to kind of expand, our personal giving within the corporate giving space. Down below, I've included the URL to where you can find this particular match on our website, and I can also drop it into the chat at the end. But at this point, I'd be happy to take questions. Like I said, this is really just an overview of corporate giving. I think the biggest takeaway here is to kind of just begin to kind of raise your hand and ask your HR department, are there ways for me to kind of throw an organization's name into that? Are there ways for me to share my passion project throughout the organization? whether that be again with like, employee resource groups, maybe signing up a team at your organization to walk at the Unite Walk. Are there a group of organizations that your employer gives you at the end of the year? How are you able to get NHF on that list? And then also inquire with your HR department about matched giving, because any gift that you give, they're able to kind of match it. It's typically a one-to-one. So just think about doubling your impact there.
Thank you very much, Teecee. That was really very interesting. I'm just going to give people a moment to pop some questions into the Q&A. So please do put your questions in there and I can put them to Teecee. I can see that we have a good attendance today, and I'm sure that some of our attendees have got some questions for you. In the meantime, maybe I can start with a question, something that I kind of was, it made me think a little bit when you brought this up, where you're talking about how this is something that may appeal particularly to Gen Z. Is it something that you think employers may have to think about changing some of their practices just to reflect the generational makeup of their workforce?
Yeah, I think I've had this conversation with friends that have kids that are kind of graduating from college and kind of entering the workforce, and I feel like there's a generation that from day one is really focused on how their employers are showing up in the community, or even how people spend their dollars. And there are people that choose not to support Amazon because they're taking money away from small businesses and things of that nature. And there's a growing movement in that direction. So I think corporations are just trying to make sure that they're positioned right to be able to attract employees and also keep them engaged. So can you continue to from an environmental standpoint, can an organization continue to pollute the environment and still give at the same time? So I kind of feel like there's that tug and pull where corporations are really just trying to figure out, walk the fine line of still being profitable, but still helping the community at the same time.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. It's certainly a changing society and a changing set of priorities, I think.
Absolutely.
I was interested also in what you were saying about the gift matching, and is that, I feel like maybe that's something that's not super well known. I don't know if I would necessarily know if my employer was doing gift matching. And I guess maybe a related question was whether you have any templates or tools, or I know you had your contact information there, and you could put it back up if you want. If people were not quite sure how to go about addressing their employer, to ask them to start thinking about including NHF or a chapter as a partner, it might be a difficult conversation to open. Do you have any tools to help them start that conversation?
Yeah, sure. So I think you're right. I mean, I ran across a stat, I think it's with nonprofitsource.com, where I think they said about 80% of employees don't know if there is even a matching program. I'm not sure if it's being hidden in purpose or what. But yeah, I think in terms of trying to figure it out, I think using the search tool that we use, and we use Double the Donation, which is a website that you can go to search on and put your employer in. If you work at Georgia Pacific, as an example, or General Electric, you can just enter that in and it'll let you know if you have a matching program. But I think just a casual email to HR, just, hey, I heard about matching giving programs. Does XYZ company have one? I think you just keep it very high level. I would imagine you're probably not the only one to have that question, or maybe post it during a all hands meeting or a town hall meeting, if that opportunity presents itself. If there's one talking about budgets and numbers and things of that nature, maybe that's not the opportunity. But if there's a chance where they're talking about end of year giving or supporting programs, I think those conversations typically come up towards the end of the year, or people will do coat drives and things of that nature, or like I mentioned, back to school drives. That could be an opportunity to ask, hey, is it possible for us to support other organizations? Are there matching gift programs? I think HR will welcome those types of questions.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. There's a question that's come in here asking, so if let's say my company and I do donate, how do I know how the money is being used? Is there any communication back letting people know like what, what happens with the money that they give? Is there some kind of a report or?
Yeah, I'm assuming this question is specific to NHF, but I'll answer it um, in general, and then I'll answer specific to NHF. So a lot of a lot of nonprofit organizations will have a breakdown of how funding is used. There's a percentage that typically goes to program support. Obviously, there's overhead because there are employees, or maybe there's a building, things of that nature. With NHS specifically, we are a scientific organization, so a large percentage of our funding goes to research. Because we're looking in terms of trying to cure disease. So for NHF, a large portion goes to research. Like I mentioned before, some of that goes to program support. Also, oftentimes nonprofits will have a 990, if you want to get very specific, a 990 on their website, and you can kind of look for that type of information there. Or there could be an impact document that kind of provides, like, sometimes there's like a pie chart that'll show a breakdown of like how funding is used. But typically nonprofits have to share a financial breakdown of how the funding is used.
Yeah, I guess that would be really useful for people to either take back to a group that might be helping them to fundraise, or in that
Absolutely.
initial conversation with HR about why you'd want a particular organization to be amongst their partners, to be able to demonstrate sort of where those funds will go, how they will be impactful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important when you have the conversation with HR you definitely want to have the statistics and the hard numbers. But I think also it's important to kind of have that storytelling side of things. Why is it passionate to you? I think the numbers are important from like a pragmatic standpoint, but also I think the empathetic and the connection side with it's important when you kind of sharing your reason as to why you want to support.
Sure, sure. Another question that's come in actually from an NHF staff is asking, they mentioned that questions sometimes come to them asking, if you donate through the United Way, can you designate your donation to NHF?
I would like to say yes. I will confirm with that. But yeah, you can definitely. I know NHF has United Way has the ability to designate. I need to confirm that NHF is listed as an opportunity with that. But short answer, yes. Second answer, I'll put my contact information back up just to confirm, and we can have a sidebar conversation.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. Well, I think that those are the questions that have come in. Is there anything else that you wanted to say to wrap up, or?
No, that's pretty much it. Like for me, like I mentioned before, to me, it's all about, kind of figuring out how you can kind of raise your hand and kind of get your personal passion projects in there. Obviously, I'm here to talk about NHF, but if there are other ones that you're interested in discussing with your HR department or with your corporate social responsibility department, don't hesitate to kind of reach out to ask questions. Also, if you'd like to have a further conversation with me, happy to chat with you. My contact information is here. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Yes, well, thank you very much. So a huge thank you to Teecee Hutcherson for taking the time to join us this afternoon and for sharing your expertise and your time with us. This recorded webinar will be available on Friday, July 14th at hemophilia.org under the events tab. If you select past events, you will find all of our archived webinars there. Also available in the events tab is the schedule of upcoming webinars in this weekly series. Please join us next week for another exciting Wednesday webinar. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon and have a great week.